So Sonic the Hedgehog 3 is the third film with Sonic the Hedgehog on the big screen, and I keep feeling like this type of film should be made for me only because, I grew up playing Sonic, and, there are 90s references here, and there are, like, in fact, at one point, the characters acknowledge that, oh yeah, the 90s were so awesome. So, growing up with Sonic being one of my favorite video games, you would think that I would kind of dig on this, but I think the problem with this particular film is that it's actually drawing from Shadow the Hedgehog, a character from the 2000s, which was when I kind of fell off Sonic the Hedgehog. And I think for good reason, because around the 2000s is when the Sonic games started having backstory and like storylines and more complicated lore, and I just wasn't digging on it. Like, I looked at it and I was like, oh, this seems a bit too silly for me. I don't think I'm going to be playing these games here. And, with the past two Sonic films, I was just kind of whatever with them. Like, they really didn't work for me. I didn't like the product placement as much. I didn't think most of the jokes were that great. I found a lot of the jokes actually kind of dated in some of those, but they were, I thought they were okay. For being just like an action adventure film for kids. Like, it's okay. Like, it's not really gelling for me, but it is trying, and it does have good energy, and I could see why kids would like that. But with Sonic the Hedgehog 3, it's just like, it just shows like the diminishing quality, I think, of these types of films, and I think I know what it is. I think I know why I'm really not digging on Sonic 3 as much, especially after Sonic 2. So I remember, like, when I was watching Sonic 2 in the theater, the one moment that got everyone really excited, that got everyone cheering more than anything else in the film, was the very end of the film when they reveal that, oh, Shadow the Hedgehog is going to be in the next Sonic movie. And everyone went nuts. And then we got Shadow in this film, and it just feels like he's very much being like very much a serious character, but there was never like that much of an exciting moment that, I got that same level of excitement that everyone was cheering for in the last film. And sure enough, at the end of this Sonic film, there was another one of those moments where the biggest cheer was at the end. And it really just feels like these films are more of like playing bingo at this point, where you go not so much to be entertained by what happens in the meat of it. You're just going there to see who's the next, Sonic character they're going to check off with this film. And I think a big problem with why this film didn't work for me is just that there isn't really a lot of chemistry or growth between any of the characters. So, of course, it picks up with Sonic the Hedgehog, voiced by Ben Schwartz, who now has two allies with him. Now he has Tails, voiced by Colleen O'Shaughnessy, and Knuckles the Echidna, voiced by Idris Elba. And I think they have a good dynamic. I like Tails as kind of like the eager fan working with Sonic, and Knuckles as kind of the fish out of water type alien who takes stuff a little bit too seriously, but does have a little bit of heart. So I think they have a good dynamic. But we don't get a lot of that because the film is racing off to its next, crucial save the world moment, in which case Sonic has to fight this new enemy called Shadow the Hedgehog, voiced by Keanu Reeves, who is another alien that has crash landed on Earth. And Shadow, they establish, is a much more serious villain. Like, he has serious pathos and just losing faith in humanity, that he just wants to blow it up. And there isn't really much more to him than that. Like, I guess they can't really do the fish out of water thing again because they already have Knuckles to do that. But there was never a moment where I felt like Sonic was playing all that well off of Shadow, or, come to think of it, just anyone playing off of anybody here. Like, there's a lot of jokes with Sonic where it just feels like he's like ad-libbing or just making jokes for himself, and he's not really interacting with the rest of the world. And it feels like everyone is in such, like, they're so close up. Like, I know these films look good with the way that, like, they composite the CGI well in with the live action, but it always felt like there was a line between Sonic and the humans where it just felt like the humans were trying to, try their best to, stick out as dopey comic relief, and all the CGI animal characters were taking this plot of this giant space laser that's going to blow up the Earth far too seriously, that to the point where they can't even really crack jokes. Right? It surprised me how few of the jokes and the zingers and the one-liners from Sonic never really landed. And to be honest, like the jokes from Sonic never really impressed me, but there was at least like a little bit of a knowing humor to them. These jokes just kind of feel like dad jokes masquerading as like too cool for school type of like a trickster mentality that just it feels it doesn't work. It, like every time like he tries to make a joke, it just falls flat. It's like, okay, it seems like a fairly obvious joke. That one didn't work. Maybe the next one will be better. Oh, that fell flat. Like, I can tell they're trying, but just it feels like bad Saturday morning cartoon writing, with how little I cared for like Sonic cracking jokes here. Now, of course, and of course, like the one comedic force in these Sonic films has been Jim Carrey, and he returns as Dr. Ivo Robotnik, but because there's nobody really equal to Jim Carrey, even Sonic, who's supposed to be like this fast-talking trickster type character, Jim Carrey can really only play off himself. So of course in this film they give him his grandfather, who of course is played by Jim Carrey, and it just feels like Carrey is in his own world. Like he has a lot of funny lines, but they're only when he is interacting with himself. And again, that just further reiterates how this film like has everyone sectioned off. Like they're in their own worlds. Like we're only in this film to make our jokes. Don't step on anyone's toes here. Just remain in your lane. And I guess like that's a safe route to take Jim Carrey because he is fairly funny. But after a while, it becomes clear like, okay, like the funny moments are when he's not interacting with like the hedgehogs or really any of the human characters, and is just in his own little world. So it was very disappointing to see, especially with all like the jokes like cracking breaking the fourth wall, which are mildly funny, but there's only so long you can go with that before you just realize, man, I'm really not interested in this premise of, Shadow's pathos and wanting to blow up the world with this space laser. I really don't care about this. And all of that would be forgiven if the film were at least, was funny. If the jokes landed, I wouldn't really care about that as much. And if there was like good character chemistry between the characters where they're not just, going over exposition or just desperate to try to cram in a few more jokes before they get to the next action sequence, I wouldn't mind the film. I'd actually be fine with it. But this actually turns out to be one of the worst Sonic films. I think just because it takes itself so seriously. Like there was rarely a moment where I cared that much for Shadow as a character. Like I know we're supposed to feel pity for him, and we do get his like tragic backstory revealed, but we spend so little time on it that I just like it feels like it would be comical if it weren't for the fact that it took itself so seriously and was so boring with how it establishes this character. Like it's trying to be that kind of faux edgy dark, which of course was kind of responsible for the Shadow the Hedgehog that we got in the 2000s, but here like it just doesn't work. Like you keep waiting for Sonic to crack like a better joke on this type of character to provide a little bit of comic relief, but again he doesn't. Shadow kind of stays in his own lane of being serious all the time. Sonic stays in his own lane of only cracking jokes at certain times, and usually when he's around Shadow he's kind of treating it very seriously, to the point where they get to the very end of the film and it flat out turns into a Dragon Ball Z fight, in which Sonic has just stopped cracking jokes and he's just speaking like a bland action hero where they all talk about, we're gonna finish this, or I have the ultimate power, or I'm gonna defeat you by using the chaos energy, and it's just it all just feels like banal like anime fight dialogue that I really didn't care about. And it really feels weird having it juxtaposed with Jim Carrey's comedic antics, which again, they're at their funniest when he's not engaging with this plot. Because when he is actually talking with his granddad about his history with Shadow and what they've this giant weapon they've made, it's really not that interesting, and it never engaged me. And not to mention the fact that this film like has a lot of human characters and a lot of actors reprising their roles from previous films. So in case you have like James Marsden and Tika Sumpter, of course, reprising their roles as Tom and Maddie, but they don't really have that much to do here. In fact, at several points in the film, they get sidelined for other human actors to come in and take their place, that there's never really a moment to have them really placed anywhere within the story. In fact, they're almost kind of like bookended in this film to a point where when they're finally brought back into the narrative, it felt like they went through an entirely different movie without the Sonic characters, which just like, even though we didn't hear much about it, it's mostly just them pursuing new hobbies. I was kind of a little bit more interested in that, if only because like it was some deviation from like this standard save the world type action plot that I don't know. I really wanted like some detour like that wedding from like the second film. I know a lot of people really didn't like the action wedding sequence in Sonic the Hedgehog 2, but I was fine with it, if only because it was a nice break from the treasure hunting story, which I really didn't care about because it just felt like the standard tropes of that type of film. Also, a real waste here of Kristen Ritter, who's playing a military director who you think would play a bigger role, and she doesn't. She is such a throwaway character here, who is just tossed in here to spout exposition and then just kind of leave and not really do anything here. And yeah, it's just like there's a weird distance between all the characters here, especially when you get to like the very end of the film, which tries to wrap everything up with a happy ending, but it's a happy ending where it almost feels like Sonic takes no inventory of anything he's done or anything he's learned, that it's just, we leave him the same way that we find him. And it's just, and it's not that interesting. It's like all we really got to see Sonic do was just fight someone and have consequences that kind of go away at the very end of the film, where he just stops growing as a character or considering anything that he's learned, just goes back to being the same old trickster as before, except with fewer jokes and like a lot of serious moments that are a bit too serious for their own good. Like, I get the film wants to have more lore to it. I get that it wants you to take these characters seriously. But within the framework that they've set up here, it feels weird. It feels very weird to kind of place this faux darkness on top of this narrative. That it really didn't work for me. And wow, like Shadow he was so, I know a lot of people love this character, but just the way that he's presented in the film just seemed boring to me. Like Keanu Reeves does his best, but he's not really given any interesting lines. He's mostly just, spouting the typical like action dialogue that he could recite in his sleep. Ben Schwartz also tries to go a little bit serious here, but it's hard to take him seriously after all the zingers that he's been cracking, and he never really puts on much of a different voice where you feel like, he's turning towards like a dark side, and just there's really no progression. It all just kind of turns into noise by the end of the film, to the point where, like, yeah, I get it, there's video game references all over the place, and I'm sure for a lot of Sonic fans who just crave the Easter eggs and just to be excited for the next character who gets revealed in the mid-credit sequence, that's fine for them. But as someone who did grow up with the Sonic games and found them fun, I didn't really have fun with this film. Mostly just the jokes didn't work, the backstory was not that interesting, and Jim Carrey is kind of in his own little world, and there's really no growth or chemistry, not even like on like a bare minimum that I would expect for them to like pull off with this type of script. It just keeps getting distracted by like all the other Sonic the Hedgehog lore and Easter eggs that it can shove into this film, and it just it doesn't work. So while I was like semi-passive with the past two Sonic films, I'm not with this one. This one is probably the worst Sonic film, just because in its attempt to kind of swirl together the silly and the serious, it doesn't mix.